Hey guys, today I'm starting a new series on how to build a REST API with Kotlin and Http4k. Http4k is unique among API servers with its unreasonable testability, making manual testing pretty much redundant. This series is aimed at beginners, so we'll be moving at a slower pace with live coding. This first episode will cover the Http4k basics, but we'll soon cover more advanced topics like databases, authorization, OpenAPI, and deployment to AWS. Now let's get started. Okay, so for our first ever Http4k service, we're going to create a project and we're going to just do something silly, like cats, of course. We're going to use Gradle, Java 21 is pretty good to work with, and that is it. So, it starts us off with a default build Gradle. Pretty much most of this is fine, except we don't need these Maven coordinates. We're using JUnit and using the Java 21 toolchain, so that's all good. We can get started here. So let's create a package. Always put it inside your company's or your personal domain, and then we put it in cats. Now, I feel like a good place to start with a service is to go with the model. So we have a cat. We're going to need an ID for it. Now, UUIDs are a pretty quick and dirty way to, well, guarantee that your model has a unique ID. Now, let's come up with some other properties, like the cat's name, their date of birth. Now, usually you use an instant, but we don't really care about exactly what time the cat was born out. So we can use a local date for that. We can also come up with the cat's breed, their color, and that's probably good enough. Now, from here we can work on a service layer. I know that not everyone works with service layers. You may do things more vertically, but I still think they're pretty useful. So let's say that we want to start getting a cat by their ID. And this is going to return a cat, maybe. Now, we need some sort of repository for them. Later on, I might bring in a relational database or a Dynamo database or something like that. But for now, that's kind of overkill. So we can just make an in-memory repository, and a mutable list is probably good enough for now. So for here, all that we need to do is find the cat that has the ID equal to the ID that we passed in, and that's it. We can also list the cats, which returns a list of cats. And it may be tempting to just return the cats like that, but if we look at our internals here, this is a mutable list, which isn't necessarily the best thing to return, because if we just return a reference to cats, and if someone goes and adds a cat or deletes a cat in the meantime, then that list that we returned is going to get mutated. So we can just return an immutable copy, and that's good enough for now. We can delete a cat by their ID, and usually when you're thinking about a REST API, you're going to want to return the cat that you just deleted. Now, doing this with a mutable list is a little funny, I guess, because first we need to find it, then we need to remove it. Like, you can do remove if, but all that does is return a boolean, doesn't return the actual cat. So we can do cats.remove, and we pass in the element, and that returns a boolean, which is fine. So we can say, if there's a multi-threading issue here, if this returned false, then we're just going to return null. That works. And now that we've removed our cat, we can just return it. Okay, cool. Next, I think this is probably the last thing we need, is creating a cat. We're not just going to let the user pass in the cat as is, because we don't want them necessarily choosing the ID. We want to control that. So let's create a data version of this. Cat data, remove the ID, and we're fine with letting the user choose the rest of these. In fact, we can even go a little further and say that we have a created at instance, which we're not going to let our user choose. So we're going to instead inject the cat data, and we're going to create a cat from this. So the ID is going to be a random ID. Created at is going to be now we could just do instant.now, but if we think ahead to testing, we're going to want to be able to inject our own clock so we can control the data coming out. So let's make that possible then. Let's inject a clock, and instead of calling instant.now, we're going to get the time from that clock. Okay, so now we just get the rest of the data from the data. Date of birth equals that, the breed equals that, and the color equals that. So we've created our model, we can save it, and then we're going to return it. Now, I'm not here to show you how to just make a cat service. We are here to learn Http4k. So let's create the API layer now. There's really no need to make an entire class for this. All that we need is a function that's going to take our cat service and convert it into an API, which in this case is just an HTTP. Oh, not that one. Oh, right, of course, I haven't even imported Http4k. Alright, well, let's do that. So, let's look at our docs over here. So we're on http4k.org, and we want to get started. To do that, we can go to the Http4k core ecosystem, and right here, we're given the instructions to install it. So let's copy that, put it here, and we need the latest version. So let's go and Google that. So Maven Central http4k bomb, which is 6.1.0.1. Okay, 6.1.0.1. Okay, so where were we? We were returning an HTTP handler, this one. And all this is a list of routes. We are going to start with v1, then cats, and that is all we need to bind to our getter. Since we have our cat service here, we can define our results, which is just list cats, and then we're going to return a response with a body of something. So normally when we're working with REST APIs, we're going to return some JSON. So let's instead look at http4k's built-in JSON handling. So there's several different choices here, and recommends using Moshi. Okay, well, let's do that. So Moshi is right here. Let's copy that, go to our build Gradle, paste it in, import, and we're still going to create a body, but we're going to use Moshi to convert it into a string. Cool. Let's test it. So inside of our test module, we're going to do our same package structure, and we're going to create a cats test. Now, the magic of Http4k is that it's often not really necessary to test the lower levels of our app, the lower layers like the cat service. We can just test the API itself, because all that Http4k is an HTTP handler, which is a request that returns a response. Well, that's already good enough to test with. So we are going to list cats, and we need an instance of our service. So service equals cat service, where we inject a clock. Well, there's clock.system, which is going to constantly be changing. Fixed, that looks pretty good. So we need to put in our time, and it is 2025:03:25, and I always just start at noon. And we need an offset, UTC. Oh, there we go. Okay, we have our service which has a fixed clock. So for here, we can go and create a cat. So name is going to be Kratos. He was born on 2022 September, which is the 9th, 22nd. Yes. Okay, then we also need the breed, and he is an American short hair. And then his color is a Lynx Point Tabby. Cool. And that's it. Let's make another one. Now, this one is going to be his sister, Athena. And she was born the same day. She is also an American short hair, except her color is a brown tabby. So, we want to test this, but we're not here to test the service layer. So it was useful for creating the cats, but we actually want to test our API. So, thankfully, all that we need to do is do service.toAPI, and we can start testing. So let's make a request here. We don't need to worry about going to localhost or whatever port, because the server isn't actually running. We're just working against the in-memory API. That's kind of the magic of Http4k. It means that our tests are going to be as fast as possible because they're not going over the network. So all that we need is to go to v1cats. Cool. And to get the response, all we do is pass our request into the API. Now, we're going to want to test this. So, Kotlin test comes with some Kotlin test assertions, which are okay. So we want the status to be okay. And we also want to verify the body. What we can do there is we want the body to be the list of some cats. So let's get the return values here, and it's going to be the list of cat1 and cat2. Now, to get the body, we can get a string version, which isn't good enough here. We need to convert it into a list of cats. But thankfully, we can do that. We can use Moshi.as a list of cats. Cool. Alright, let's test it. Alright, well, it failed because we expected a list of cat data structures, but Moshi turned it into a list of maps, which is not what we told it to do. Well, what we can do is check the docs here, and there are some gotchas. Okay, Moshi declared a list and it doesn't extract properly. Well, that sounds like our problem. It occurs when serializing bare lists to and from JSON with the underlying library being lazy using a map. Oh, well, that's exactly our problem. Use an array instead. Okay, well, that works. What we could do is we can turn this to an array, which is often good enough, but you may actually have reason to make a wrapper here where it returns a list of cats and some sort of pagination data where you might have the next token. That's definitely something we can do, but we don't care about that for now. So we're just going to return the array, and then in our tests, if you do assert equals on an array, it's not going to be able to do it properly because arrays are stupid. So let's say that this is an array of cats, but then convert it to a list. Okay, let's test that out. And there you go. That passed. Let's continue. So let's make another operation. So this one is going to be getting a cat by the ID. Okay, so how do we get the ID out of this request? Well, I kind of glossed over it before, but this is actually a function that takes a request and returns a response. And we can get stuff out of this request. So if we go to the path and we get the ID, that works. And we can then get the cat out of our service and put the ID. Why does this fail? Because it required a UUID but found an optional string. Okay, well, it's optional because this request has no idea that there's actually a cat ID in the path, which is okay. So we could just say we're smarter than you and get a UUID from the string. But there's a slightly better way to do this with Http4k lenses. So a lens is just a way to get something in or out of a request. And if we want a path lens, we can do this. So ID lens equals path dot UUID. That's pretty nifty. There's also string, int, long, URI, and it's of cat ID. And then we can just use that to inject the lens into this string here. And then we can go and extract the ID from the lens. So ID lens of request, and that compiles. So what happens if there actually wasn't an ID lens in the path? Well, it's just going to throw a extraction error, which when you're working with a server will get caught and turned into a 400, which I'd say is a lot better than us dealing with it ourselves. So let's get this into the body. We can continue using Moshi, but we can, why does it not like that? Required any found a cat. Oh yes, yes. So this cat is optional because what happens if that cat with that ID doesn't exist? Well, we're probably going to want to return a 404. So if the cat is null, then return a 404. Otherwise, return that. Okay, so as I was saying, we can continue to use Moshi here, but it was a little of a bit of a pain to get the data out of the response. So we can actually still use lenses for this. So the cat lens is a body thing, and auto cats dot to lens. Well, how the heck do we get Moshi in here? Well, if we look at auto over here, we actually imported an extension function on Moshi, which, well, there's your answer. We can also do it explicitly, like this. That works too. But we're just going to use this for now. So, body lenses are a bit different. We have to use with cat lens of results. Oh, right, yeah, cat's lens, array of cat. Cat's lens. There we go, that works. And we still want our cat lens. And we're going to use that here. Cool. Let's test it. So, let's make a new. So get cat, and we want to test the not found case. We don't even need to create any cats. All we need to make is a request to v1 and some random UUID. Oops, needs to be v1 cats. There you go. And so the response, we want it to be not found. So we could just continue using assert equals over here. Status.notfound equals response.status. But Http4k actually has some testing helpers here. So you can use hamcrest, cotest, strict. I really like cotest. So let's get that in, and it gives us some nice things. So the response should have status okay, or response should have body, which is useful. Up to you, but I like cotest, so let's get it in. We want a test implementation. Now the nice thing about using Http4k's helper here is that it actually brings cotest in with you, so you don't need to remember what the coordinates are, because I don't. So if we go to our cats test, we can do response should have body status not found. Cool. And we can even make it even more compact here by passing our request through the API and then saying should have status not found. Cool, let's test that. Okay, that's good. Let's test the successful case where we are going to first create a cat. Let's just copy this stuff. Might be nice to have some test fixtures to reduce the copy paste, but I don't care about that right now. Let's also get the second one just to make sure that we're getting the correct one. And this, we want to verify two things. First, that the response has the status of okay, and the response should have body, where, which one do we want? There's several here. This one's nice because you can put the lens in. So cat lens equal to, no, we want B. So response should have a body where the deserialized response is cat1. Yes. So over here we want to put our cat1.id. Yes. Okay. Let's test that. Cool. And just for sanity here, oh, why? Because there's nothing more useless than a passing test. Alright, okay, alright. We're sure it works fine. Cool. Okay, that's it. Next is creating a cat. So, this one, v1 cats bind method.post to request. All right. Let's just get this compiling. Now, to create a cat, we need the cat data, which means another lens. Whoops, caps lock. Okay, so what we can do is cat lens request to get the cat data, required cat data. Oh, cat data lens. There you go. Okay, that created our cat, and with cat lens of cat. Cool. So let's test this. So test create cat, where we are going to create a request to post to v1 cats. And the nice thing here is that we can reuse the cat data lens. And so the name is Toggles, my old cat. Date of birth is, oh boy, a while back. 2004? June and 1st, something like that. She is a American, short hair, and she is also a brown tabby. Okay, here's our request. We can pass it through the API to get the response. And we could just do our typical assertions before, but I want to show you something else. I want to show you Http4k's approval testing module, which is a way of comparing the responses to actual JSON documents. Because when we're using these lenses, we don't actually know what the JSON looks like behind the scenes. The UUID could be in byte format for all I know, or the date of birth could be in, I don't know, could be in a format I don't like. So let's actually see what it looks like. Oh, right, I need to import the module, which is here. And put it here, change it to a test implementation. And now we can get extend with, and we actually want a JSON approval test. So now what we can do is we can put an approver in here. Let's do approver.assert approved. We can paste in the response and the expected status. Okay. Status.ok. So let's run that. And of course it failed the first time. If we look at the difference, the expected was null, but the actual was this. So the ID, that looks good. That looks good. That all looks good to me. Now, how do we actually approve this? Well, that JSON file was actually put inside these test resources. And right now it's a .actual. To approve it, we are going to rename it to .approved, and we're going to rerun the test. And why did it fail? Oh, because the UUID changed. Right, so how are we going to make that work? Well, if we look at create cat, it's just a random UUID. We're not controlling the random state like we are controlling the time. So how can we do that? Well, UUID.random, you can't put a random in. Name UUID from bytes or from string. So it doesn't look like there's a way for us to, well, can we override random? So the secure random is equal to holder.number generator, which is private final. All right, well, we can't override that then. So the best we can do is UUID name UUID from bytes, and we have to put some bytes in to generate the UUID. Well, that we can do. Let's inject a random here, a Kotlin random, and let's get some random bytes. Random.next bytes. Okay, so how many bytes do we want? Well, we know that my guess is if we only get like 4 bytes, we're gonna have a very small random space to actually generate our UUID from. So we know UUIDs are 40 characters, so let's just say 40 bytes. I know that UUIDs, they're 40 characters, but they hold less than 40 bytes, whatever. And we put that in. Cool. Magic numbers suck, so let's just define a const over here. Private const val UUID length equals 40. Sure. And we can just put that in there. Cool. Now, this isn't going to compile because inside of our cats test we need to inject a random. The nice thing here is that we, in our test, can just put in a regular random, and we're going to give it the ultimate number, 42. But it wants a Kotlin random. Can I just use a Kotlin random here? Now we're going to... magic numbers. Private const val ultimate number. I'm just being stupid here, but... consistency. Alright. Run the test. We know it's going to fail again because I expected this, actual, that. Okay, so let's approve that one more time, and now it should be fully deterministic. Cool. Alright, so that's one, not shortcoming or disadvantage, but one consideration for using the approval test module. You have to control all the random or mutable state in your application, which is honestly for the best because there's nothing worse than having random state affecting your application. So it's nice to be able to have a consistent seed that we can work with here. Okay, so that's creating a cat. The final thing is deleting the cats. v1 cats and cat ID lens. So we're going to bind this to a delete. And we want the ID. We want the deleted cats. And so if we can use this silly structure, but what I like to do is be compact. So we can use the fancy Kotlin stuff here. So if we found a cat, we're going to return a response with that cat. Otherwise, we're going to return not found. And that compiles. So let's test it. Oops, caps lock, and fudge fingers. Delete cat, not found. Alright, so request method.delete to v1 cats, a random cats. So I am still using random state here. I could generate a random UUID if I wanted to, which I guess I will. Let's just get that. There we go. Now we're consistent. And pass this through the API, and it should have the status of not found. And then we also want to test the successful case. So we want this. We actually want cats to exist here. And we are going to delete Athena, unfortunately. Okay, so our response here should have status of okay. Actually, we're going to use an approval test here. Alright. One thing I actually forgot to do previously, which I'll do now, is to actually ensure that our API here really changed the state of our application. So we're going to use the service layer here. List cats should contain exactly cat1. And we can also, on our create cat method here, service.listCats should contain exactly... Now, if I extracted the cat from the response, I'd just see if it had this. I don't have that. So what I could do is should have size 1. There we go. So okay, we made 2 cats, delete cat not found and delete cat success. Let's run this and, oh, yes, of course, our approval test failed. So we wanted to delete Athena, and that looks right. So let's go and approve this file. Run again, and it passed. Cool. So that's pretty much it for the testing. The only thing we're missing at this point is a main method. We got so carried away with actually testing our app that we never needed a main method until now. But obviously I want to actually see if the server runs at this point. Let's create a cat service where the clock can now be system and random can now be secure random. Oh, I need a Kotlin random. There we go. And to API. So now we have our API. We actually need to turn it into a server. So API.asServer. By default, Http4k comes with the Sun HTTP server, which should not really be used in production. It's really just for testing. We actually need to get ourselves a real server. So let's go back to the docs here, and we are going to look for servers, and there's way too many to choose from. And they don't really recommend one. Jetty's the example, and Jetty is actually the one that I would recommend. I find it incredibly stable. And it even supports virtual threads, which is nice. So there's 2 versions of Jetty. There's Jetty, Jetty Loom. So Jetty Loom is the one that supports virtual threads. We have a server on port 8000, and we're going to start it. So, let's run this. And running. Now let's go to localhost 8000 v1 cats. And we got a empty list as we expected. Now, I really don't want to be bothering here making calls with curl and stuff to actually test this myself. We already tested it with our cats test here. We already tested all the business logic, the mutations. We do not need to test Jetty because Http4k has already done that for us. We know that our server is running here, and if we really cared, we could go and do some manual testing. But the beauty of Http4k is that you don't need to do that. We have already done all of our testing here. We can even run coverage here and have a look at how much we actually did here. Oh, that's the wrong thing. Cats test, run it with coverage. Replace, and look, we have 87% coverage, and we barely even tried. And that is pretty much it. We have our cat service. So that was how to get started building a REST API with Kotlin and Http4k. I hope this has been helpful and that you'll give Http4k a shot. In the next episodes, we'll be adding to the Cats API with more advanced features. Let me know in the comments which ones you'd like to see. And that's it. See you guys later.